Decided to edit and repost this video. I will explain at the end. Hello friends, this is going to be a quick one. I got some comments on the last video, the one about the ancient copper mining museum that is planned for Baraga County, Michigan, in cooperation with the Baraga County Historical Society. Most of the comments positive, but I got one guy who wanted to argue about it started off as a discussion about the authenticity of the Burroughs Cave artifacts. More on that coming soon. But then it kind of shifted into an argument about the authenticity of the Michigan relics, which I haven't talked about directly. The Michigan relics are every bit as bad as the Burroughs Cave artifacts. They are, I would say, obvious to even the most casual observer as fakes, frauds, based on the intrinsic qualities of the artifacts themselves, as well as the context of their discovery, which are historically well documented. Anyway, I thought I would go through that conversation because I think it illustrates a good point, and I will hopefully resolve it to the satisfaction of all parties involved. Okay, here it starts off. We're talking about this comment with the project is good news, exciting to have investment, blah, 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 blah. Anyone that doesn't want to learn about the past cannot go into the museum. So I commented, so you're cool with the fake artifacts then? He said, you're making an assumption that they are fake, yet there are no fakes. Read it again, there are no fakes. And he used caps, so you know that's. Then he goes on to try to defend the artifact that even Scott Walter directly said was fake, and we start talking about that a little bit. And I'll talk more about that artifact later because I did not tell the whole story of that one in particular in that video. But then he brought in the Michigan relics. He said there are also Michigan relics that have the same symbols as shown on the Burroughs cave stones. And here he's talking about the mystic symbol. I will try to put one over here as I'm talking. It's this weird kind of cuneiform symbol, which cuneiform makes sense stamped in clay, but doesn't make sense inscribed on something with the little wedgy, shapy things. Anyway, those things are on the all over the Michigan relics, as well as the Burroughs cave artifacts. Now, the Michigan relics, just as a little bit of backstory, were found between, I believe, 1890 and the very early 1920s or very late 19-teens. Very obviously fakes. They were found pretty much only, as far as I know, when Daniel Soper, who was a former Michigan Secretary of State, I believe, who got run out of office for embezzlement, I think is a story. Don't quote me on any of this stuff. This is not that important. There was a guy who did the digging named Scotford. There was a local church dean named Savage, who apparently was more of a true believer than a co-conspirator. And I think there might have been somebody else involved. I don't know, but they would lead people out to these mounds, and Scotford would start digging, and then they would come across something, and then they would invite the visiting dignitary to finish unearthing the artifact. And then these people would testify that they saw it come out of the ground themselves, and it must be legitimate for that reason or whatever. And scholars looked at them, including a bunch of LDS scholars, and concluded that they were made from modern materials, modern copper, using metal tools. The clay artifacts in particular are terrible, and they actually have some of these, I know, in a drawer in the museum in the University of Michigan where I went to grad school, because I opened it, I was like, oh, that's the Michigan relics. They're made of unfired clay, which means they would have disintegrated very quickly had they been in the earth for any amount of time. So clearly the fraudsters were making these things quickly, and there's other details about that to get into. But anyway, this guy wants to hang his hat on them in my comment section, say the Michigan relics have the same symbols as the Burroughs cave stones. And I say the Michigan relics are fake. They were made with modern materials, copper bought at the hardware store with modern tools, and they were only found by, I said guts, that's a typo, by the guys that were faking them. And I say, how about just give me one artifact from Burroughs cave that is provably real? Let's not talk about the thousands of artifacts. Just give me one good one, and let's discuss that one, the one that you think is the best. Let's start there. You pick the battlefield and let's do it. But he wants to talk about the Michigan relics. So he says, no, I disagree that the Michigan relics are fakes. It's actually something that was found by many individuals in mounds. Yes, that's true. Under the circumstances I just told you, guided there by Soper and Scotford. The subsequent falsification effort is what you are focused on. Well, they were falsified. They were shown to be false. And I say, oh, please. They were only found during the lifespans of the fakers, and only when the fakers guided people to spots to dig. Some were made with modern copper from the hardware store. Some were made of unfired clay that would never have survived in the ground. They're ridiculous. So what I just told you. He says, wrong again, Joker. Many others found Michigan relics in other Michigan mounds after Soper, after Soper and Savage were gone. They are real. Do your research and learn. So I've heard this so many times. Do your research, do your own research. Dude, if you've already done the research, send me your research. That's part of how human innovation builds on itself. Don't reinvent the wheel here. So I say, why don't you just provide details instead of just assertions? If you know of many other Michigan relics that were found after the deaths of Soper and Savage, please let me know where I can see the documentation of these finds. So, to his credit, he gives me a citation. The Syracuse Herald, November 4th, 1916, page 10. This is when more Michigan relics were found in Detroit. Read it again and weep. This is important because some jokers claim the Michigan relics were found only while Soper were alive and present. However, this was the first report of relics found after they died and therefore had no possibility of planting it. And I replied, Daniel Soper died in 1923. Scotford also died in the 1920s, I believe. And actually, that's not certain. He disappears from the record in like 1912. People stopped talking about him, but I couldn't find a death certificate or anything. So I don't know exactly when he died. And I said, I'm not great at math, but I believe 1916 came before the 1920s. So Soper was indeed alive in the 1920s. And I said to him, I can't find a copy of this available online. If you'd really like me to look at it, please send me a copy. And I give him my email address there. And he did. He sent me a copy of the article he was referring to. And he says, after 1912, Scotford disappears from the public record. That's true. He said Savage died in Elkhart, Indiana in 1913, not in Michigan. That is not true. Then we'll talk about that. He said by 1914, Soper had moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee. So here's what he sent me. So this is an article that he says is the Syracuse whatever. I have no reason to doubt that. New York, November 4th, the long-continued search of scientists and ethnologists for the secret of the mound builders of the middle western part of the United States may in time result in success. Father Laurentius Scheidel, Benedictine monk. Let's see. Study of inscriptions found on tablets and excavations made in the mounds, and already found the key to some of the inscriptions. Is opening sooner or later. Dr. Henry Hivernat of the Catholic University at Washington recently dug out of a mound near Detroit a slate tablet about a foot long containing a circular calendar of 13 months indicated by dots and mysterious characters. Below the calendar are two heads in profile representing types of semi-civilized people. The tablet was lying due east and west, and the general formation of its surroundings and the straits of ashes and charcoal indicated that the mound had been a tomb. The tablet would be placed in the museum of the Catholic University. It continues. Okay, so here you see the whole thing. June last, Father Scheidel found in a mound in the same vicinity, this blah, 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 blah. So that article certainly does seem to indicate that people were finding these things in 1916, if that's the date, right? Fine. So, just like we have a wire service today, like the AP, stories are written in one place and often picked up and used as filler in other newspapers. Nobody, well, maybe some people did, but I'm not sure why people in Syracuse would have cared about this specific story, but it got printed there. But what often happens, stories are written and then they are changed, they are edited, shortened, when they get transferred to new newspaper. So with this name, Henry Hivernat, first thing I did was check and see whether that's a real person. Because oftentimes with like the giant skeleton stuff, it's not even a real person. Well, this was a real guy. And I found the original article that this came from. Prehistoric tablet of great value found by Dr. Hivernat in Michigan, Wisconsin local history and biography articles. And actually, I'm not sure. State, Wisconsin, article date 1916, 9/17. So this is a article. I'm not sure which newspaper it appeared in. Doesn't say. Anyway, this article gives more details. It's the same thing they're talking about. In September of 1916, on September 12th, Dr. Henry Hivernat of the Catholic University of Washington, D.C. took from a mound in the woods north of Detroit a slate tablet about a foot long with a circular calendar engraved on one side. Below the ancient calendar are two heads in profile representing types of semi-civilized people whose identity is not yet known. The calendar is circular, representing 13 months, and sections indicating by dots and mysterious characters. Members of the party. Some of you have maybe already, let me see if I can make that a little bit bigger. Some of you have already read ahead here. The find was made by the learned Orientologist, that was Dr. Henry Hivernat, through the courtesy of Dean Savage of Detroit. So that's Dr. James Savage, who was Dean of the Catholic Church, or whatever, and Mr. Daniel E. Soper of Chattanooga. So he had indeed moved to Chattanooga, but he was back for the relic hunting, who had just completed arrangements for a party of friends to join in a relic hunt. When learning that Dr. Hivernat had just arrived in the city, Mr. Dean cordially invited him to come along. Several mounds were opened, and then it goes on the other part of the article talking about Father Laurentius Scheidel and his non-Indian stuff or whatever. So it is in fact abundantly clear when you go back to the original source that this expedition was conducted with Daniel Soper, who was the faker of these artifacts. And Dean Savage had not died. He was very much alive. The rumors of his death had been greatly exaggerated. And you can find information about Dean Savage. Let me hear. I found something about him. Most Holy Trinity Parish Church. In 1887, he was named the pastor of Most Holy Trinity. He remained pastor for 50 years and was called Dean Savage. So 1887 plus 50 gets you to 1927, which I believe was the date of his death. So unless he remained the pastor after he died, he was definitely still alive. And he was definitely on that expedition to find those incredible Michigan relics under the guidance of Daniel Soper. So that account and that original article pretty much clear up that claim of people finding things after a certain time period. It's important to get the guy's deaths right. And, you know, when Daniel Soper lived in Chattanooga, he apparently was still coming back to Detroit to find artifacts because maybe that was his bread and butter. I don't know how money changed hands in these ways or what exactly he was getting out of it. But clearly he was still involved. However, given that multiple people must have been involved in making these things, I wouldn't even accept, you know, if somebody quote unquote found an artifact under similar circumstances without Soper there, I would still be, I wouldn't say that proves that all the artifacts are real at all. That just proved that there were multiple people involved in faking them. And I think the same can probably be said for the Burroughs Cave stuff. You know, Russ Burroughs has been putting these things out in pulses for decades now. So the whole idea that, oh, no one person could have made this doesn't mean that they're all real. Not at all. There were definitely co-conspirators in the Michigan Relics case. Be very surprised if there weren't some in the Burroughs Cave case too. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say about that. That was a pretty easy one. If you've got something else that you think proves the Michigan relics have to be true, please let me know. Always willing to look at them, but for that one, you are welcome. And that's what I want to say about that. Bye-bye. So the issue here was that the genius who I was responding to in the comments, once he saw that I was addressing his comments in a video, got upset and emailed me and demanded that I take his name off and that I was, attacking his character, that he did not ask to be in a video, that he, whatever. So I've got some news for you. I'm standing on a sidewalk right now. I'm out in public. Anything I say on this sidewalk, somebody could come along, write about it, put it in the newspaper, whatever. I have no expectation of privacy. That is a concept from journalism. YouTube is a public space. If you're gonna use your profile and comment on something in a way that anybody across the entire world can see, you have made a comment in public. You have forfeited your right to privacy. So I think I'm going to make a standard announcement that I'm going to put in front of videos that if you comment on my videos and you want to have an argument or discussion about something, we're going to discuss it, but you don't have the right to come back later and demand that once I prove you wrong that I take that down. That's ridiculous. So that's not going to happen. But anyway, mystery person, for this you are welcome. This is my one exception. Now I'm going to cross the street and go home. Bye-bye.